When did you all start working together on the documentary?
We first met in November 2021 when I kind of broached the idea of telling their story, and the war wasn't even an idea in anybody's mind.
Well, I'm sure it was an idea in someone's.
Yeah. And then when the war started to percolate, I came back to Jason Tom and said, hey, if we're going to tell your story, this is probably the time, because the restaurant was started by Tom's father-in-law, Jason's grandfather, as a result of war and leaving a Russian-oppressed country in the 40s. And so he created Veselka in 1954 as a hub for displaced Ukrainians. So I said, well, with that starting point of the restaurant, it makes sense with this new war to kind of pair them together. And we started filming on the 11th day of the war.
Wow. So when you originally thought of the idea of telling the story, obviously it changed significantly with the onset of the war. What was the original idea, and how did that evolution happen?
I just recently was looking through like old proposals that I had sent them to pitch them, and the first sentence is, it's a story about a father and son, and that remained the through line. And what's really interesting is, as a result of the war, that storyline actually has become amplified in that, Jason, not to give too much away, but Jason becomes a surrogate father to one of his staff members. And actually you could say multiple. And the movie also explores their relationship over the years as father and son in a working environment. But yeah, the war amplified the initial germ of an idea.
What was it like seeing your son take on that kind of paternal or mentor role with his staff?
Well, it was very gratifying. My wife and I, my wife's a veterinarian and she was practicing in the neighborhood. When the pandemic started, we kind of got scared and moved into our second home in Vermont. So Jason took over and he did a great job. I'm very thankful that I had a succession plan that succeeded. No, I'm very proud of him. He's doing a great job.
The thing that I think hit us all was, and again, not to give too much away, but when Jason is able to bring over several family members of staff members, there's this conflict suddenly of, do they really want to be here? Would they act like they're now safe, but they'd really rather be home? And in some cases, another person has chosen to stay. They don't want to go back, even though they said that would always be their home. And so Jason would, work one-on-one with the staff members who, parents, aunts and uncles were going through this in real time. And our cameras capture these shifting change of thoughts.
Do you care to elaborate? I've seen the documentary. I know the dynamic that you're talking about.
Okay,
Well,
good.
you've seen it, you. So obviously, as you can see, there's a father-son relationship on multiple levels. Some of the original ideas before we formulated the final idea was to create some kind of homage to my father and working under him for years, the decades that I have. And obviously, we had a good succession plan. It was already in the works to take over, but seeing what was happening with the ongoings of the war, it just sped up his retirement. But he's still, even though he's officially retired, he's still an active member and somebody that I can convey in or trust. But yeah, there's a lot of underlying stories that I think resonates from our relationship, and then his relationship with my grandfather and my relationship with my staff. So it was interesting it was great to see it all together.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just to go back to your question, over the years before Jason took over, actually when he was like a kid, a young man, we had kind of a tradition of sponsoring Polish and Ukrainian people who would come to Veselka and start working, but their immigration status was not 100% legal. So I would typically, especially the more the valued employees and the employees that had political asylum stories and for a variety of reasons didn't want to go back to either Poland or Ukraine. So we had a tradition of sponsoring people, but before the war it was very difficult. It was a months and months, but years and years long process.
And costly.
And costly. But we, I'm proud to say we were able to successfully sponsor a fair number of people. But when the war started, all of a sudden it got relatively easy. You do have to make a commitment to support whoever you bring over financially, but.
The paper process, was a lot shorter, actually weeks versus what took years in the past. So having that program, United for Ukraine, put in place by the Biden administration definitely helped.
Is that still in effect?
I think it is, believe it or not.
Yeah, I was curious, like as I was watching that section of the documentary, I was curious about whether that was still in effect, because it's been some time. And what the reception of New Yorkers to Ukrainian refugees has been. Is
Amazing.
It still?
Yeah.
It's
Open arms. I mean, our governor was on record there saying that she was going to allow the largest amount of immigrants from Ukraine into her state. Obviously now it's a different situation with the migrants coming into New York, but that's another story.
Maybe there will be a documentary about that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure there will be.
So your documentary covers a variety of really important themes: family dynamics, relationships, culture, history, and community. What are the most important things that you want viewers of the documentary to come away with?
That we shouldn't always look to our local and government leaders. That here you have a visual of who I'm talking about. The moment in the movie. That we should look to ourselves and our neighbors to help. I mean, what they have done, in 2 years, is it officially 600,000?
500.
So, yeah. So, like in 2 years, that's amazing. For a restaurant to do that while they're doing their other business,
You're referencing something that I think we should make explicit.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amount of funds raised, right?
Correct.
And for what organization?
Not one particular one, a group of them.
Mm-hmm.
You want to hear them?
Yeah, no, I would love to hear how much you guys have raised for which organizations, because I think it's really impressive and really important.
Yeah, you can speak to
Oh,
that.
so I mean, there were, I don't know if it's mentioned in the documentary, I think there is, that I felt it very important with the outpouring of love from our local communities and people coming from all over, being where we are and what we represent as being the oldest Ukrainian American restaurant in New York, if not in the US. Ways to give back. I mean, my staff were in shock and they didn't know whether they wanted to be here or there, but everybody came together and they really embraced the community when they came and said, what can we do for you? That I had to do something to give back to not only them, but to their people in Ukraine, their families, not directly, but indirectly. So one of our most popular dishes, borscht, which shortly after the war had started earned UNESCO heritage status. It was in a fight between Ukraine and Russia over where it was originated. So I decided that all the sales of our borscht, whether you had it in the restaurant, took it out, eat it here in the living room, or we shipped nationwide, that I would donate those funds to a variety of different nonprofits that were helping on a humanitarian level. Razum for Ukraine, World Central Kitchen, our local church, which was shown in the movie, was having difficult times. Staff motivated or inspired, decided because we have long hours, the church was collecting and shipping all kinds of humanitarian needs, from diapers to canned goods to batteries, and they were having difficulties raising funds to ship it. So I donated a large sum to our local church. A variety of others, I can give you a full list. But a half dozen local organizations that were helping, recent immigrants. I'm on a board, and my father is a member of Ukrainian Habitat Fund, which was helping them secure apartment space.
It was really inspiring. There was a real outpouring of people, especially when the war started. How can we help? Tell us how we can help. What can we do? So we did what we could.
Well, we could. I mean, people would ask about monetary donations. I'm not a nonprofit. I'm a restaurant. So thankfully we have an organization that we partner with, Razom for Ukraine, which is we are one of their cohorts or sponsors. When they had started originally in 2014, actually, where they're celebrating their 10-year anniversary, as we celebrate our 70th anniversary, when the Crimean invasion started. And Thomas said there was a lot of press coming, even prior to the invasion, because everybody wanted to comment and they wanted a feel-good story and interview a staff member. How does it feel? Where's your family in Ukraine? And my staff did not feel comfortable speaking. They said, you speak on our behalf. You're well spoken. You understand. You're our voice, because I know you feel what we feel. So I became their voice, and I think and then various staff members came to ask for help for sponsoring family members. I think I made 10 applications, which 8 were approved, and actually I think all 8 now work in the restaurant, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
So not only did they get here, they got a job.
That's really amazing. I think it's really cool that you have that type of relationship with your workers. Yeah, I noticed that dynamic from the start of the film when you're talking about there's no therapy. You're Soviet. You're very stoic.
Yeah.
And I was curious how you approach, and you've kind of touched on this, but I want to explore it more, the dynamic of interacting with and interviewing staff members like Vitaly and Dima, who are just either very direct, or they're very direct, and aren't necessarily wanting to open up, and there's moments where they're like, I don't want to talk, and that's fine, and you move on. But how did that opening up happen? Because there is a fine line between storytelling and exploitation, you're talking about, with not wanting to profit off of the attention because of something so momentously tragic.
It
so I just wanted to explore that.
Yeah, it was always something I was very aware of. I remember on the first day we filmed, which was day 11 of the war, and I remember us talking about how the closest comparison I think we all felt was 9/11.
Yeah.
The city felt like 9/11 for months. And obviously at Veselka specifically, there was just a very kind of sad, quiet, cold feeling. And so when I would gently try to talk to people, I usually ask Tom or Jason, hey, is it okay? But if I just approached people, largely everyone was no, except for the pierogi ladies. They were okay to talk a little bit. And the big question I had was, do I have a movie to make? To your point, I never wanted to exploit anybody, but to make a movie, you need to get answers and hear how people are thinking in the moment. And as I would say to Jason often, sometimes a non-answer is the most dramatic answer. And so I just kind of went with that train of thought of, I will not, as the filmmaker, get in the way of the story and try to manipulate anything. But when they want to talk, that's the story. It's okay, Vitaly took 2 months to want to talk to me. And now, last night we had a dinner and he'll tell me anything. I can't shut him up. I love them all. But yeah, in the beginning I was just I don't know how I'm gonna get any sort of commentary from people. And the movie started off there was more interviews that were filmed than what ended up in the movie. And I always want to make a movie that was not interview driven. I want the movie to be like it is from Act 2 to the end, but there was a realization that the only way we could set up the cornerstone of the story, the history of it, was to have Tom and Jason tell their stories, looking back at Volodymyr to the present. But then as of Act 2, it goes into this real time, you're living their lives in real time.
There was a scene where, spoilers, Vitaly is texting or calling with his granny, and it's unclear what's happening with his mom. Did you have like a camera in Vitaly's house? How did you shoot that?
Oh, yeah, you're talking about, yeah, when the grandmother calls at night.
And they're
yeah.
worried about his mom. It's 3 a.m. They don't know where she is. And
Yeah.
they're trying to figure things out.
Yeah. So yeah, we just, whenever we knew, like when she was going to the airport, like he would just kind of tell us when certain events were happening, and we would be like at the ready for whatever happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious how that came about because that was a very dramatic scene for a documentary.
Yeah, and she calls him 3 times,
That night.
worrying. And I think the most interesting and telling thing is how he tells her, Grandma, don't worry, everything will be fine. And then he, to me, off camera, you hear him say it, he goes, I'm very worried.
Yeah.
He'll never tell her that, but to us, he's like, no, I'm really worried.
We have to wrap up. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? One last parting shot.
I have something, a tagline that I've used. I mean, obviously this was for people to know that not necessarily that this is a war against Ukraine, but Ukraine was an independent country for 30 years prior to this invasion or war, and that we should not think of this just as a war against Ukraine, but a war against democracy, and that we all should take a stand and keep the awareness and keep the message that we need to support Ukraine as a whole, as a country.
Yeah, we're concerned because support seems to be waning.
Yeah.
People seem to be losing interest, and I think this is like the crucial time when we really need to pay attention. So I'm hoping that in some small way this film makes the whole plight of the Ukrainian people more on the front burner. I had the pleasure of running a business for 50 plus years that was founded by Ukrainian immigrants. A huge part of my success is based on the hard work and dedication of Ukrainians and secondarily Polish people. And to see them have to go through this is really, it's hurtful to me personally.
I'm sure.
Yeah.